Thank you. Good morning. I was away last weekend with Kath and the kids. We were at a big family gathering on Anglesey, where some of our family are from and live, and it's a heavenly place. And I was reminiscing with one of my cousins, who's actually not a cousin, but I grew up thinking he was a cousin. Anyone got friends like that? Cousins who aren't cousins, who actually are cousins, sort of. And we were remembering this moment when we were playing cricket in the big field outside the farmhouse, just before they get to the edge of their land. It's now a big campsite. And we were playing cricket, and one of us, we couldn't quite remember who it was, hit this extraordinary six. So good that it went through one of the glass windows in the newly converted barn. And so we did like what anyone would do at that point. We looked at each other and we said, "Run!" And as we ran, we heard this voice coming out of the barn saying, boys, come back." And so we did what any other boys in that situation would do. We kept running. And eventually, we ran out of run, and they got hold of us. And I'll tell you what happened next in a moment. That's a hook to keep you engaged as we race through Jonah chapter 1. This is one of the shortest, strangest, and most relatable books in the entire Bible. And I would encourage you, if you've not read it, to read it through this week. It is a subversive and literary masterpiece. It challenges us and our assumptions about prophecy, mercy, God's character. It speaks actually to us of God's great love and his relentless pursuit of sinful people. As we journey through it, we'll discover renegade cities and this rebellious prophet Jonah, who God decides to use even though he gets it wrong so many times, because you see, nobody is beyond God's reach. Most of us know the Sunday school version. It goes a little bit like this. Here's a picture of it. God says go. Jonah says no. Big fish eats Jonah. 3 days later, sound familiar? The fish spits out Jonah. He stinks and says sorry. It's a great story, but it's not the story. The story actually is more profound and beautiful than that. And when we slow down and read this opening chapter, we realize it's not really a story about fish. It's a terrifyingly honest, psychological portrait of a person trying to outrun the one thing they are ultimately dependent on, the presence of God. And you and I are so like Jonah. This is actually a story about hiding. And if we're honest, we may well know that feeling. You may well know the pressure of the call of God on your life that's going to come at cost. And actually, it collides with this instinct, our broken instinct of self-protection. And yet the way of Jesus calls us to face our fear in faith. The prophet Jonah is asked to do one thing, go to Nineveh and preach, and he does the exact opposite. He gets on a boat headed for Tarshish. The first thing I think we can see here in this book is the ever-present temptation to run away from God when it sounds so hard. But what you see in the story of Jonah is, try as you might, just like we couldn't outrun my uncle and biggest cousin, you cannot outrun God's grace. You just can't. So 3 things real quick. Number 1, we need to notice the lure of Tarshish in our own lives. We run, all of us at times, to control our story. Jonah is commanded by God to go to Nineveh and to preach on his behalf to this, verse 2, great city. This idea repulses Jonah. He has this hatred of the Assyrian people. And he had it for good reason. So one commentator says this: the Assyrian kings were proud of their cruel and terrible reputation and went to great trouble and expense to record their exploits for posterity. Like they had a museum for their cruelty. So Jonah has this understandable hatred of it, cultural hatred. He was aware of the torture and dismemberment and pain and shame of the victims of the Assyrians. And so they are this renegade city that he's called to go to, but everything inside of him says they're not worthy, God, of your grace and your mercy. And so he doesn't go because he wouldn't go. And the geography here is everything. Have a look at this map. Nineveh was east, Tarshish was west. Jonah didn't just walk away from the call. He went to the furthest possible edge of the known world he could find. He's in Joppa. It's 550 miles to Nineveh. He goes 2,500 miles the other way. That's how far he's determined to escape God. But it turns out he couldn't. Just like my uncle and cousin got hold of us. Tarshish is symbolic for us of the place we run to when we run away from God. Why did Jonah run? Well, I think theologically there's an answer. He didn't want the Ninevites to be saved. He's angry with God that he's showing compassion and mercy towards them. He wants them to be punished, not to be given a chance to repent and be saved, to experience mercy and grace. This is the roots, by the way, of religious nationalism, which is not consistent with the gospel. His desire to run is rooted in theological bias. And that prideful thing that can come up in all of us, if we're honest, which is something like, God, it turns out on this one I know better than you who deserves your love. And psychologically, he ran for the same reasons we do, self-protection. The call to Nineveh was heavy. It came with risk. There's cultural confrontation. He was stepping into danger. Tarshish, on the other hand, is the other side of the sea. It represents safety, a safe harbor where Jonah could settle, be comfortable, and get back to a life that he was in control of. We often think of running from God as like this dramatic, sinful moment. But I think it's often much quieter and slower and subtle. It's the choice of comfort over calling, opting for a safer but smaller life than the big, dangerous one he calls us to. It's prioritizing our own financial and physical security over the spiritual needs of our community. It's interesting to think about that on Remembrance Sunday, isn't it? As we rightly honor all those people who've given up all of those things so that we can have them. Tarshish isn't a place, it's a strategy for safety. It's our strategy of self-protection where we choose our safety and our preferences over God's will and direction for our lives. And so we all too easily buy the ticket, pay the fare, and head in the exact opposite direction. The tragedy is that we, in running from God, are not just running from God, we're actually running from the blessings that God has for us, from the opportunity to grow and become all that we're meant to be in Christ, and play our part in rewriting the story of all all humanity and God's creation. It doesn't actually solve anything, it just delays the inevitable. My uncle and cousin got hold of us, and they said, guys, that was an epic shot. I cannot believe you hit that ball so hard. And I cannot believe you managed to get it on target to hit the window. Don't worry about it. We'll replace the window, but never, ever forget that shot. And I'd forgotten that shot, but my cousin, who's not really my cousin, Paul, has never forgotten that moment because he's the one that hit it. I want to suggest number 2, that we see in this story that the sleep in the storm is not a deep, peaceful sleep, really. It's a counterfeit form of peace. Jonah buys his ticket, sails away. He thinks he's free, but God enters the scene. We see this in verses 4 and 6. And I think this is the most convicting part of this whole story. This storm arrives, a divine intentional disruption. The world is coming apart. The seasoned sailors, not people of certainly Jonah's faith, start praying to their various gods. They're panicking. They're having to throw overboard all their livelihoods, all their resources, all the stuff they're trying to ship to the other side of the sea to sell just so they can survive. And where is the prophet of the living God? He's asleep in the boat. Not much use right there. And side note, this should remind us of another prophet who slept in a boat in a storm. Not running from the will of God, but in the midst of it. Jonah's deep sleep in the boat is not the kind of rest he's really looking for. It's actually a form of spiritual anesthesia, of self-medicating, of pain avoidance through sort of just escapism and denial. It's total evasion. He's bought his ticket out of there in complete fear and denial and becomes spiritually inert. Have you ever been there? Where you know what God's calling you to do, but it's so hard, you're just going to deny it, turn, and find some other means of seeking and achieving a degree of peace. But this is the counterfeit peace of denial that says, I'm not doing it, and I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to do it my way, Yahweh. And notice it right there and then, he's making this choice just at the point where the need of the people around him is huge. This non-believing ship crew are scared, and the one sent to serve them, the prophet, is caught napping on the job. The captain has to come down and shake him awake. How can you sleep? Get up! Call on your God! Friends, right now, the world that we are in is in a really big storm, and it needs the people of God to be embracing the call of God, not running from it and trying to find a boat to escape it from and nap in. It needs us spiritually alert, not spiritually inert. It needs a courageous church, one that is different to the world and one that is showing a different way to the world. They need to see us not panicking and running, but turning towards the storm, turning towards the thing that is most difficult, because that is God's call. His grace is for everyone. His mercy is for everyone. And he is sending you and he's sending me, whether you like it or not. Third and finally, I want to suggest to you that the true peace that Jonah is looking for, the true peace that you and I are looking for, is found not in denial, but in faith. The storm intensifies, the truth is revealed through the casting of lots, and the sailors eventually, as we heard, confront Jonah. And he's surprisingly honest at this point. He's realized he's got nowhere to run anymore, and he has to confess his God, his mission, his flight. And then comes the terrible answer in verse 11 to the sailor's question, what should we do to make the sea calm down for us? And Jonah replies, pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. He realizes the only way to achieve peace for him and everyone was to do the very hardest thing. And so they throw him overboard. The sailors try everything to avoid that, verse 13. But actually, eventually they have no choice. And so they throw him overboard. They pray for forgiveness to Jonah's God for that, verse 15 and 16. And in that moment, as Jonah surrenders his life, the moment he let go of the boat, let go of the schedule, let go of the strategy of heading to Tarshish, the raging sea grew calm. The peace he was looking for and their peace was found not in surviving the storm through clever navigation. We think we can navigate our way out of the storms that we find ourselves in, but trust me, you can't. Their peace was found in the moment of total, final abandonment to the hands of God. And I want to suggest to you the profound but scary truth of Christian spirituality is this, that we only find our true identity and purpose when we surrender control to God. The life we desperately try to save in running, that we try to escape through the boat of human safety, is actually the very life we have to give up in order to find God's peace. It turns out the safest place for Jonah wasn't the ship to Tarshish. It was in the middle of the storm, totally submitted to the will of God. How do we know that? Well, because as you read on, this big fish comes along and swallows him up. And that sounds a bit weird. If you're at church for the first time, you're going, really? There's a big fish in a story in the Bible and he swallows this man and he doesn't die? Yes. Yes. It's actually a story of grace. Go figure. Come back next week. So to land this, the story of Jonah is our story. We're all called by God to go towards people who are different from us, towards a world that doesn't operate like it should, that hurts people, that does bad things, and at times celebrates it. We are constantly being called to go to our own Ninevehs, to face the fear of that in order to show mercy and grace to people, to speak the truth and to love them. And we're constantly, if we're not careful, tempted to buy tickets to our own Tarshish, to pursue the safety of self-will, the silence of comfort, and to the illusion of control, but we can't. The gospel promise here is found in the water. God pursues us through the storms. He sends the disruptions not to punish us, but to reorient us. When we turn in faith, despite our fear, and embrace it, despite that looking crazy to everyone else, that's where the peace is. That's where the safety is. That's where God's grace is. Tim Keller, in his phenomenal book on the book of Jonah, says this: Jonah went into the depths of the sea in order to save the sailors, but Jesus went into the depths of death and separation from God, hell itself, in order to save Jonah and to save you and to save me. Friends, the calm we're looking for is not found in perfect performance, but it's found in perfect abandonment to the one who controls the wind and the waves. And so a question: will you choose the way of Jesus over your own way, trusting in faith that he is the way? That is the question we're posed again today through Jonah by the Spirit. Let's be still.